I'm Mark Fenton. I'm a climate change specialist at HS2, so I lead on the development and integration of the carbon management requirements for the design, construction and operation of the new high-speed network in the UK. So just a brief bit of background. HS2 Limited is the organisation responsible for developing and promoting the UK's new high-speed railway. We're responsible for obtaining the powers to build and operate the railway, for delivering the infrastructure programme, and we also act as a proxy train operator. We're also responsible for ensuring that HS2 is designed, built and operates to the highest safety and sustainability standards, that it's well integrated into the existing transport network, and that it's reliable, seamless and easy to use for all of our passengers. So High-Speed 2 is going to be an entirely new, dedicated high-speed railway. We're delivering it in phases. Phase 1 connects London to the West Midlands. Phase 2A provides connection between West Midlands and Crewe. Phase 2, the wider network, provides connections to Manchester and Leeds. And as you can see, it's integrated into the existing rail network and connects 8 of the UK's largest cities. So in terms of timeline, by the end of this year, we hope to have royal assent, which will give us the powers to start to build HS2, phase 1 of it starting next year. Operating phase 1 in 2026, the connection between the West Midlands and Crewe in 2027, and the wider phase 2 network in 2033. So it's a long time scale, a big project. And just to give you an idea of the scale of the project, phase 1 alone is a 230-kilometre route. Over half of that is in tunnel or cuttings. And associated with that, we have 128 million tonnes of excavated material. We've got close to 300 bridge structures, 31 main construction compounds, and 299 satellite compounds. So it's a substantial infrastructure investment. And inevitably, we have a substantial carbon footprint. So building phase 1, potentially up to 6 million tonnes of carbon dioxide, operating it between 2 and 3 million tonnes. But we also deliver some carbon benefits. High-speed rail is a low-carbon mode of transport. And by displacing journeys from passenger and freight journeys from road and air onto rail, we can deliver a carbon benefit. We're also planting millions of trees, which will sequester carbon. But ultimately, we still have a residual carbon footprint, which is what we have on the end. And we're required by our sponsor, the UK Government Department for Transport, to address the carbon footprint of the scheme. And that's reflected in our sustainability policy, which identifies climate change as a key theme of our work and sets out the objective to minimise the carbon footprint and deliver low-carbon, long-distance journeys. So what are we doing to minimise the carbon footprint? Well, we've identified 4 key enablers for minimising carbon, and these set the foundations and provide the environment and the imperative for the supply chain to deliver lower carbon solutions, which will minimise our carbon footprint. So we can put them into 4 broad categories: leadership and governance. HS2 needs to lead by example. We need to make sure that carbon is integrated into our decision-making processes and that we're challenging the carbon footprint at all phases throughout delivery, construction, and operation. Culture and communication. Minimising carbon needs to become part of business-as-usual processes, and we're trying to do that, integrating it into all of our processes. Communicating our requirements internally, trying to upskill our own staff, and upskill and communicate our requirements with the supply chain. Innovation is a key driver for carbon reduction, and we need to make sure that we provide the mechanisms that allow the supply chain to respond, and also to challenge standards where they might create barriers for delivering lower carbon innovative solutions. And procurement is key. We're entirely reliant on our supply chain to deliver a low carbon infrastructure, and we need to make sure that the commercial arrangements that we develop enable and appropriately incentivize our supply chain to minimize carbon. So I just want to provide a few examples of what we've been doing under each of those enablers. So in terms of leadership, we've considered the carbon footprint of the scheme from the earliest stages of the design. We've integrated it into appraisals of route options, and we're one of the first projects to integrate climate assessments into the environmental impact assessment for phase 1. This example is just purely of the construction carbon footprint, so most relevant to most of you guys here. Like Stefan was saying, a large proportion is associated with the materials, particularly concrete and steel. But there's also a significant portion, close to 30%, associated with transport and construction activities. So all these machines that are sitting outside here account for that 30%. And we're using this carbon footprint as a tool to identify our carbon hotspots, to inform our strategies and our action plans, to identify where we need to deliver innovation capacity so that we can most effectively reduce our carbon footprint. And we need to reduce carbon across everything. That 30% is still a big volume of a big quantity of carbon emissions. So we need everything from reducing the volume of excavation, reducing the materials that we use, reducing transport, being more clever about how we move things, using alternative fuels if we can, 3D modeling, virtual models so that we can have more efficient construction processes. And we've reaffirmed our commitment for minimizing carbon. We've endorsed the Infrastructure Carmel of You, which is an initiative between UK government and the construction industry. And this has been endorsed by our Chief Executive Officer, so it has the highest level sponsorship from HS2 Limited. And this commits us to pursuing lower carbon solutions and to releasing the value of lower carbon through leadership, innovation, and procurement. And we've also adopted the carbon minimization hierarchy. So this is a project requirement. It applies to all stages of the project, to all our suppliers, to all of the works that they do. So they need to demonstrate to us that they are avoiding carbon, so building nothing, building less where possible, reducing carbon, building more efficiently, building cleverly, using low carbon energy, alternative fuels. And that's a hierarchy of actions that we want our supply chain to demonstrate that they have adopted and to show and report how they've reduced the carbon footprint. In terms of communication, we've been publicly reporting on our performance for a number of years. We'll continue to do so going forward, and that will be transparent reporting, both internally to our board and externally, so everybody, public, supply chain, everybody knows how we're performing. We've been engaging with the supply chain, working with trade associations, supply chain conferences to develop and inform our own requirements and our targets. We work with industry networks, so rail and construction, to develop consistent requirements and to drive best practice across client groups and across the industry. And we have wider programs with innovation and education to communicate our challenges so that you guys, academia, the supply chain, can start to develop solutions. And in terms of innovation and standards, we've been doing a lot in this area. So I don't know if many of you have heard of PAS 2080. This is in the UK, a publicly available specification for carbon management in infrastructure. And that sets out a framework, and we'll be intending for our supply chain to be compliant with PAS 2080. So that will require leadership throughout the supply chain and alignment of all of our values and visions to collaborate, to innovate, and to deliver lower carbon solutions. BREEAM Infrastructure, we've been working with the Building Research Establishment for the last 18 months to develop this new scheme. And again, we'll be adopting that as a requirement of the project. And there's a number of requirements associated with carbon, materials, energy that will be cascaded through the supply chain. We've been working with the British Standards Institute on developing new standards for low carbon concrete and for off-site manufacture. And we've also worked with the rail industry in the UK to develop a rail carbon tool. So this is a freely available tool to UK industry, and it provides a mechanism to calculate the carbon footprint of schemes, to assess them, to identify carbon hotspots, to then optioneer and to identify and reduce carbon. And so that's a freely available tool for any members of the UK rail industry. And then most importantly, procurement. We are entirely reliant on our supply chain in delivering a step change in carbon performance. And that is what we're going to require. So this top line illustrates our strategic themes. Environment is one of those strategic themes. Within that, there's a specific objective to minimize and reduce the carbon footprint. So this is how we are going to select and evaluate tenders, and also how we will measure performance during delivery. So some of the key enablers there, we need collaboration and innovation and integration with our supply chain. We're looking at how we can incentivize performance. Carbon will be a key performance indicator. There will be a baseline against which performance will be measured, and there will be targets set to improve against that baseline, and they'll potentially be incentivized. And the key message is that if you can't demonstrate that you can reduce carbon, you won't win work on HS2. And going forward, if you don't deliver the reductions you say, then you'll be disadvantaged in winning work ahead. So it's key that your organizations can demonstrate as part of a aligned, collaborative, innovative supply chain that you can minimize the carbon footprint of any of the activities that you are delivering. So thank you. There's just some further details there if anybody wants information about our supply chain communications.
Thank you so much, Mark. Oh, it's a fantastic project, and we were talking earlier about how it will really transform the UK once it's developed, but it's a very complex project, and so I can imagine working on the climate change aspects of this is equally. I mean, one thing that struck me in your presentation, you had kind of the 4 components of your climate change strategy that you were working on. You talked about leadership and innovation and also culture change. Those 3, it seemed like, not that they're easy, but they're within your control as a corporation. The HS2 corporation can kind of, set its strategy and set its course. Whereas it strikes me the 4th area, which you were just talking about, the supply chain, is probably one of the more complex, because what happens if some of the companies you want to work with and you think maybe have the best services and products maybe aren't just quite ready from a climate change perspective? So just, can you tell us a bit how you're addressing that challenge?
Certainly. Yeah. As I say, we're heavily reliant on our supply chain. They will be delivering all of our design and construction activities. And we have a real challenge in that we want a step change in performance. And there's a gap in both capability, capacity. There's a skills gap within the supply chain. So we're doing a lot of our work is an education program. We're developing a National College for High-Speed Rail. So that'll bring in apprenticeships and provide new skills across carbon and raise awareness of what we're trying to do. And innovation is a key part. We won't achieve our targets without innovation. So again, we have an innovation program going out to academia, trying to work with them as early as possible, set up trials so that we can get innovative solutions integrated into the design as soon as possible.
Yeah, it's great, because I guess what then starts to happen too is you're almost pulling the industry up with you. Yeah. So while you guys are very ambitious about your targets, the next infrastructure project might not be, but you've encouraged and incentivized the industry to kind of move up that level. So hopefully over time we'll be seeing that each infrastructure project in the UK becomes more and more ambitious because the capability is there. So,
certainly hope so.
Yeah, great, fantastic knock-on effect there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, great.